Hey, what's up, guys? It's Juan. Well, we're talking about the more histories again, and here's the we're gonna talk about the history of Black people in Napa. You know, if you can see all those great people that are gonna have a great experience and great matters that we have to conclude with Black people. Here's the difference in the story because this is what the book is about. It's called Hidden History of Napa Valley, but they might tell you what it is, but it might be saying in the book, so I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it's writing in the story because there's too much paragraphs that have been going on for all those good essential reading. So I'm gonna have to tell you right now. So here we go. Finally free, Aaron Rice and his family settled to the life in Napa. Robert purchased a large farm near what is now the Napa State Hospital, and the family ran in together for years. Robert also frequently preached in Napa's African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. Sadly, Lewis died of tuberculosis in 1862. He was not yet 12 when African Americans won the right to vote. Robert, Aaron, and Nathaniel were one of the first to the country to register to vote. Nathaniel married twice, first to Rebecca, who died of the tuberculosis in 1875, then into Annie Elizabeth Dyer. Edward Halton's stepdaughter. Robert passed away in 1875, followed by Dilsey a year later, and Charlotte 2 years after that. William Rice relocated to Walnut Creek 2 months after the 1860 court cases against Aaron and Nathaniel. He died there in 1885. Do you see why there's like so many mansions that were just coming out for the Zion Church? That's when the Napa just been started. You know what I mean? Napa has like the bottomless people in Napa for all those African Americans. That's why we're the church. That's where African Americans' homes they've been live there like across the East Napa. You know what I mean? Back in the history's days, they used to have a lot of African Americans across the East Napa. You know what I mean? It's a little far because it's where all those farmlands and all that the places they live there. That's the reason why they just got there. Okay, so here's the next paragraph that we're going to talk about too. In 1862, an African American man in Napa recorded 43 Black people in Napa Napa City alone, including 8 farmers, 2 blacksmiths, 2 carpenters, 3 barbers, 5 wood speculators, and poultry dealers, 4 jobbers. There are 13 families, none of them owning the house they live in. Pioneering Black families, both free and former slaves, were staking to their own claim on the valley. But there's other people that have been recorded from like in 1849 for the first time in Napa to live an African American. Her name was like Elizabeth Lizzie Brooks, who arrived in 1849 for 60 years old and lived in this town for another 45 years. She's been there a lot when Napa has been small. African American person when became one. But however, the 43 divided by 2, it's about like in the 20 people and African American people in across the 1850s, because I know there's a lot of across around East Napa because they don't have they don't have people who are free, who are former slaves and all that. You should know that stuff. All the histories that have been begun for all those crazy shit, you know? This is when all those racism that just been started going on in Napa County, like sometimes. But it might be really hard to create the definition because it's pretty weird and pretty much dynastic. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna have to tell you what's going on about some more all those Black Californians that we're gonna see. So here we go. Black Californians were required to pay school taxes, but state laws barred African Americans from enrolling in white schools. In public schools trying to integrate risk the loss of state funding. A separate school can set up for there were at least 10 black children in the school district, but it could not receive private funds. So African Americans took matters into their own hands and opened colored schools throughout the states. Unfortunately, white colored schools were separate from, but they were hardly equal. It's hard because sometimes, segregations, there have been, well, Napa used to have a colored school, like the African school, church, they have one already, you know what I mean? But sometimes they just don't have it gathered together when they show up. And here's the history. There was one guy that he was been in the 20th century, like named Harry Drinkwater. Drinkwater's family in Napa, they've been having the most among families. They've been long there so far. So does the Abrams family. Abrams family, like Daryl. Think about it like the good old times. You just to remember like the good old families that were just reunion for years. Nobody in the family who have their dignity to have their rights and rise up for black people's lives. But it's crazy because Elizabeth Brooks, she's the only person who she's been in Napa for years before she had to raise kids to among themselves. It's crazy because nobody in Enchanted around who lived among there is just crazy. All of this, in the community of the black people, it's so big. When you look at the population like that, like at the end of the day, you could see how many thousand people what they live in. You know what I mean? It's so crazy because African American people today, it's like 488. That's not enough about people how they live in for black community. But then the black community, it was big before, but something's a little weird how Napa is. When they got the results in the East Napa sites, without the community in East Napa sites, when they have a black community, some of they were separate. You know what I mean? They separate themselves from each colors. Colored places, they just don't get it. When they build something like better, can't just sit there and just do nothing. Just go to school, go to work, and have some fun that you can do. You know what I mean? And here's another raising story that we're gonna talk about. That's gonna help you to know who that is. So I'll tell you right now. Okay, at first, black manifests in Napa attend church alongside white congregants, but in 1867, they collected funds to establish their own African Methodist Zion Church. The Napa Register offered its support by encouraging donations. Soon enough, African American churchgoers purchased the Methodist Episcopal Church, old wooden structure, and moved to the northwestern corner of the Randolph and Oak Street in Napa. Oh wow, Randolph and Oak Street. That's one of the oldest streets in Napa that I've ever seen by so far. But I never seen like little streets that they've been started from the bottom, but now we're here. You know what I mean? That's when about all those people they were just they've been just begun. Despite the separation, relations between the two congresses remained friendly. When ANAZ Bishop J.J. Clinton was invited to speak to Napa's White Manifest Episcopal Church in 1868, he was also preached to the black church. His sermons attracted such attention that many Napans went to the both service, and white churches was full of black congregations for the morning church service. And the tiny Amos church was packed with all those white attenders in the evening. At the time, it was the largest congregations ever assembled in Napa for a black event. Like the colored school, Napa's Mass Church was short-lived. It is unclear when the church was abandoned, but it likely happened by the early 1880s. The second MS Church was founded in 1893, the time somewhere on Vallejo Street, just in the north of downtown. How long the new church lasted is unknown, but it was in operation to at least in the late 1800s, 1890s. Why did the two MS churches collapse is a mystery, but the rapidly dwelling black population did not help matters. Well, I gotta tell you what's going on, because there's a lot of churches. They used to be around in Napa, because one went to St. John, and then we got like the Adventist churches for black people, and then the other one that was the African Methodist Zion Church. It's pretty crazy. It's crazy when we got like so many people they've been attached together. But it's crazy because many people reside and many people resolve. Many people think what they have to belong to. I know it's kind of racist, but Napa is a racist city because it's been going on in all those churches and stuff. But but fortunately, you just can't that shit to get to the end. But it's a little bit too progress when it initially come down when they didn't open up. But it's crazy. You know what I mean? Crazy. Okay, so Warren has been extricating the excellence of our black community. But not by much. Ran afoul of the law, and local newspapers rarely published negative articles against them like they did with other races and ethnic groups. Overall, black Napans were law-abiding, respectful, progressive, and compassionate and civility active. Until the 1860s, the black population in Napa County had been growing only gradually. Within a decade, the population nearly doubled to more than 100. The number would not be surpassed for another 80 years. The most remarkable about this new group of African Americans was the increase in skilled workers and literacy. Census records show that those who were illiterated and tended to be old enough to be born into slavery, their children and grandchildren were generally literate and attended school. Most adults worked as laborers in a service or industry or in skilled trades like barbering or blacksmithing. One 17-year-old from Missouri, Richard Rimmons, raced his horses, and he and another black man, William Snowden, worked for Nathan Coombs, the founder of Napa, on his horse ranch. But by the 1880s and 1890s, the population was beginning to drop, but those who remained held a wide variety of jobs. Margaret Miller was the dressmaker. Henry P. Pearson, a career Henry Croden, a coachman. Nathan Rice and Thomas Painter, Timothy Masters and Jesse Purcell, a tenor. George Stewart, a shepherd. Samuel Starr, a paper changer who hangs a wallpaper. Well, this is all of the history where all these black people, they've been set up, all those good people there have been going up to the struggle and progress. You know what I mean? This is what happens when you see all those good recessions that they have a good economic from African Americans, but they're pretty low because all of this shit is pretty crazy. all of this and the famous histories about the people in Napa County for 1800s or 1900s or 2000s. Can you imagine like how many centuries ago when they have the famous black people they just don't have? Either like someone else that they just don't have the real crazy histories, you know? People they've been belonging in the ghetto, you know, like when there's like a lot of African American people in the community, you know, like there was like 200 people in the 1900s, 200 people in the ghetto. This is so much than the people that were just affecting to us because we're Mexicans. Mexicans don't live in a ghetto since we've been there for like 1940s, since the segregation. It's crazy because people in Napa aren't even engaging together because we're too contagious about the history. And we're contagious to see many people they've been living with the train station, and many people living on the cars and automobiles and McDonald's and Kmart, Walmart, or anything like that. Or any one of the business that was been formed in the 1860s. Like Lord and Taylor or something like that. Napa Premium Artists was been started since like the 1860s. Don't you know that? That's been where all these black people work there. You know what I mean? Many people work there. Everything. Everything on the black people is all the workers in the family and in schools. Because they've been extreme attachable to get doubled because they were doubled since like when they were 600 or whatever. Because all they said in that before, like I said before, they were been doubled when they were at 1,000. That was like around like between 600 to 1,000. Many of Chinese people live there. White Americans live there. And then also those immigrants like Italians, they live there too. You know, Italians, they've been there for like 100 years. And they haven't been stuck in Napa for 100 years. Since the 1870 to 1970. Don't you know that? Like how many years they've been started on the struggle and they just have there for fun in the US? That's fucking retarded because if you think about like how racism hurts, if people don't care about how Napa is and the rest of black people, they have like different meanings for like if they've been born to be slaves, that's crazy. You know, like I feel like the history of the people, they just don't have the dignity for rights. But I do have the real concession with the same people I know. But if you know, you know. You got to be ready to know everybody's business. This is because this is about Moore's family business, Abrams' family's business, Drinkwater's family's business, or all that. It has to be like the same people what they attached about. You know what I mean? Think about the same people what we have today. Or especially for tomorrow. That's what happens when people they're keep affecting too much in people's business to have problems. You know what I mean? Black people had problems lately, like in the past. That's why you should never treat on others for Mexicans that you should be treat them. You know what I mean? That's why you should be treated what we have. Because many people, when whoever got pregnant, they can go to San Francisco and Vallejo or any cities they can be born there. It doesn't matter what kind of skinny you are, and doesn't matter what kind of people we have. That's a negative thought. If you have a negative thought in your head, think about who were you born. Think about where you're born. Think about your histories. Because whoever someone is adopted in a family for African American family in Napa Valley, think about yourself. Don't take that strategy if you open that book. Because I already read the book. It was cruelly crazy. The hidden history was acting crazy. They were abandoned for like lots of buildings. You know what I mean? And the histories, they're still resolved. And they never resolved for all those good buildings. This is what happens when when Napa has a good history for years. And that was it, because when we talk about it in the first history of Napa Valley, we talk about 40 buildings. There's 40 buildings and 40 houses. There's 20 houses and 20 buildings. That's it. There isn't more enough people where we haven't lived there since like the 1850s. They were like 149 populations. And they double up like when they were like 1870. They were like 1,879. That's where all black people, they've been doubled up before they struggled down in 1880. Before all the Americans, they just come in. And then, and the Chinese, they've been slipping away a little bit. But the Chinese, all they do is they could just hold on to it or send it back to China. But it's crazy because racism has been crazy. But they have the same key laundry in Napa. But they've been have there for years. Years that they come. But it was weird when they come to Napa for a long time, years. But it's crazy when they have to remember all those good histories to remember. In 1890s in 1900 was 4,000 people. 4,395 and then 4,005. That's where all those migrations, they've been double up a little bit. You know what I mean? Napa was been small when they have like 1,000 people so far. And they didn't get to catch up too much. This is what happens when people, they just can't double up in those populations. When they got like the white people the most. Because white people, they didn't have double up for like more than blacks. Because blacks, they've been still up into hundreds. After they just ran out of the people they have. You know what I mean? That's when before Mexicans, they've been doubled up for like in the 1940s. Or 1920s. Because when there were Immigration Act, Chinese people are coming back. Mexicans, and then Asians, other Asians, like Japanese or Filipinos, Koreans. It won't matter if they would live in Napa, because Napa has been have a good histories for a long time. That's what happens when every history counts. Especially like when they have 5,700 from 1910, 1920, 6,700, and then 1930, 6,437 since the Great Depression. The economics has been low before. It's pretty crazy. And then 1940 was like 7,700. That's when all the Mexicans, they've been double up. So does the 1950s, because 50s is all about like the rest of people they've been suffocated for all the big living. They've been suffocated a lot, because there has been like a lot of brocheros, a lot of people who are rancheros, a lot of people who own the good old houses. They have Sawyer Tanning Company. They have everything. They have everything in Napa they live. And then 1960s was 22,170. That's where all they began, when African Americans, they were just starting up for Bloods and Crips and shit. You know what I mean? Sirs and Norteños, they've been have there for years. It's crazy. You know what I mean? They rolled around since through decades. And then without all the Italians, now it's the white Americans, and then rest of the adjacent people, like in the 70s to 2010s, it's all about 36,000, and then 50,000 in 1880. 1990s was 61,000, and then 2000 was 72,000. They've been extremely double up with the most when we arrived here in Napa, when we were kids. When we were here in Napa, we were kids, We've been double up when we were here. Yeah, since like the 1990s when we were babies, you know? This is what happens when we've been raised up for like for for big years. And then 2010 was about 76,000, and then Napo's been busy because not only they grow like about 80,000 or whatever, if they run it up to like 80,000 because it's a busy city, because they got a busy people now. It's crazy because all of this matters. They're just like the demographics are crazy because all of this is like 28,000 of all those Hispanics and Latinos. It's a lot. And then for the other races, that's like 2,883. You know what I mean? Or 13,256 for the other races. You know what I mean? That's more like exactly where they live. And then Asians are like 1,755. Native Americans are like 637. They're better than like black people. But it's crazy because they have like very good populations in Napa. They've been regrowth for all of the history through times, you know? In that timeline, there is a lot of people who have belonged in there and who have been begun living like in a cheap city. Napa was so cheap since the 1850s. This is what happens when people they were just belong in like farmhouses and then or everything on like those cattle or horses and beavers and donkeys and all those animals. They're just pretty expressive. You know what I mean? They're just too meaningful when they know about like the great people what they have. You know what I mean? Talking about demographics. I'm talking about black people. I'm talking about the struggles in process. You know, things have been changed since all these people there have been had the dignity in their own size. You know what I mean? But it's a lot because violence is a crime low. But they used to be moderated since like the 1970s to 90s. But not that much anymore because they've been spent time for like living here and then just working for Napa wineries and have their good times to eat one of those very good winery restaurants. They're more pureful and more opportunity, you know. It's not that bad. Maybe you could just get used to it and try to have fun, you know? It's a prejudice. Now Napa is adjacent city because, you know, that's like at the 2020s now. Because right now the coronavirus is a crazy disease. But you know, there is a lot of issues of what that's going on in the county and in the city. Because in the majority, like from today, it still goes on for the rest of the people. And now we've seen double up for Hispanics and Latinos, besides like 20,000 in 2010. Now 2020s are double up because I've never seen like they're growing up now, and that's it. Well, I would like to say thank you for talking about the hidden history of Napa Valley. So we can talk about that later. So this is your boy Juan. Well, thank you for watching this video. Thank you.